So you are a stranger to me, as far as I know. How do we know each other?
So I saw you on the Bigger Pockets podcast like 5 years ago. I jumped down the broke as a choice rabbit hole. I read a lot of stuff that you were putting out there and on Bigger Pockets. And then I actually met up with some of your team down in North Carolina, did a deal down there with Shelby and some folks that she knew. And then actually I was the guy that bumped into you at the elevator at the Best Ever conference, like very quick conversation.
Oh, dude, love that. I love this world. This is a great universe.
It's a small world, man. And like I've seen your face on everything. Like been watching the Better Life podcast and saw the one that you did recently there. And yeah, so like your face was like fresh in my mind when you walked out of the elevator, and I was like, oh,
Oh,
that's
that's so
Alex.
fascinating. Yeah, yeah,
How was the conference for
nice.
you?
That was one of my favorite conferences. Best ever conference this past week, 2 weeks ago. Yeah, that was a trajectory shaping conference for me.
Was that the first time you've been to that one?
No, that was the third.
Third, yeah. So you've been out there since
But you know this business,
a
it's
while.
something about like you show up over and over again, and then like things start to. You go to a conference, you're like, what do I get out of it? And it's like, I don't know. But the second time, then people are like, they start to remember you. By the third time, they're like, Alex is a real estate investor. Alex is a serious real estate investor, you know? And
Yep.
people treat you differently when they know you're committed. So it's interesting how things have changed out there for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like you said, like consistency at conferences is key because you'll see the same players that are in, that same world that you just described over and over again, and then those are the tribe that you gravitate forward with. Like, we operate in like a very like niche part of the real estate sector, and we see that a lot. Like but this was the third year for us at the big conference in our space, and it's like now they're friends, right, instead of strangers.
Yeah, that's all of life. It's like showing up is some high percentage of what counts. I mean, I think about the gym a lot. It's if you go to the gym, it kind of works. Not always, it's not all of it, but it's like, ugh, that's 80% of it. And if you don't go to the gym, it never works.
Correct.
And it's the same thing with real estate deals, relationships, friendships. I mean, I think about contractors a lot. I'm like, who gets hired in the contracting world? It's like the guy who shows up and gives you a bid, because most of them just don't. Most of them just won't show up and they won't give you a bid. So if you could just get to the finish line, you're like, oh, well, you're hired. I called 10 guys, 5 called me back, 3 gave me, came out, 1 gave me a bid. You're hired.
Yeah, especially in like, I don't know if you still are heavy in the Fayetteville area, but when we flew down there in 2020, same thing, called 10 people, 3 got back to me, scheduled 3 meetings, 1 person showed up, like in person down there, and that was the guy we ended up going with.
Who?
He's a great guy. William Bailey,
I don't
Carolina
know.
Creations, I think is his company.
Nope.
So he did a top of the
My
line.
partner down there, though, yeah, that's good. That's good, dude. Yeah, my partner down there he's dead ass reliable. So, but I mean, he falls through the cracks with some people too. So I get it. It's life. But yeah, if you show up, you get a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, you're showing up, it seems like every other day doing this kind of thing right now. What's your goal for this moving forward?
I've been doing this, strangers calls. I've been doing this for 6 years. And for like only 6 months ago, I was like, I should probably publish those.
Yeah.
Which seems like wasted time now that I didn't, but it is what it is. But yeah, my goal with this, it's kind of hard to explain. It's one of the few things in my no, it's not that's not a good way to put it. I'm rambling. My goal is to provide my time and attention to anybody who might need it without asking for anything in return. I don't have a real inward goal to get something out of it. It's more like most of my life that's good has been given to me by somebody who is just altruistic. Hey, you want to learn real estate? And I know real estate. I'll teach you everything I know. Here's some content. Here's some free content. Here's some free education. Shadow me. I'll teach you. Here's meetups, coffees. It's like people don't really have not. Everything I've learned, I've basically learned on somebody else's free time, and I just try to act as a servant back to people now. So I've been doing this for a long time, and through natural progression, I get 2 things out of it. One, I do make friends,
Sure.
and sometimes friends become partners. I have done. I wouldn't have my 24 or 52 unit apartment buildings without strangers calls, and So, and I sometimes I get investors, right? I get your email address.
Yep.
So I get to, hey, here's, like, I don't know if you saw the recent, I wrote a big 100 photo blog of best ever conference. So it's like, I don't know if that came to your inbox, but, I get email addresses one at a time, 4 or 5 a week.
Yeah. Well, hey, man,
Like,
that's about
it's not,
compounding interest.
it does add up, but my hope is that my goodwill into the universe it compounds in a way that far exceeds my goals.
Sure. No, I get that a lot. I think the path that you described of having coffee, whatever, virtual meetups, that kind of stuff with people, you never know where those conversations are going to go. Maybe they don't go anywhere for a year or 5 years. But like I said, I heard about you 4 years ago, took a lot of your advice and your connections, did something for me, and then circling, like running into you in the elevator 4 years later, right? I'm like, the world is strange like that, but it's the people that are consistently in it that stand to benefit in the long term. Because like if I didn't see your face between then and 4 years from now, I might not have recognized you in the elevator.
Yeah, I show up, and I'm thankful that I do go to a lot of conferences. I have a knack for getting into rooms that are far outside of my skill set. Brandon Turner allowed me to come to Maui for a year and build that podcast. I mean, I had never built a podcast before. I didn't really know Brandon. I mean, I don't know how I know how I landed that job, but it was definitely like a blessing.
Yep.
And so,
well, you showed up and you provided value far before anybody ever knew who you were. Like you're taking pictures of the conference, doing the photographer's job, getting pictures of Brandon, right? And that leapfrogs into where you are now.
yeah. I show up. I do what I do, and it's sort of, I get my share. Let's say.
Yeah. So how's the podcast building going?
Well, with Brandon, dude, that podcast didn't exist. I showed up, and when I got there, what he wanted and what he needed, it took me a few months to understand there was a difference. But I fixed both problems. I built him a high-quality mobile video podcast. We kind of turned the mobile off. But what I did is I found a studio on island, built out a studio. It's not my favorite, but those things take iterations, right? But I built a studio, and then we built an entire back-end system, hired a bunch of people so that it would become short clips and it would rank on YouTube and all these things, built all that stuff out. And then I hired 3 guys to basically run my position so that I hired my way out of a job. We hit 1 million downloads in the first year, first 10 months, about probably 2 months ago now. And then a week before Best Ever Conference, I actually parted ways. Me and Brandon parted ways on perfectly good terms. Parted ways. I left the island. I'm sort of done with that project, and now I'm moving to Texas, looking for my next thing.
Are you trying to do something similar?
Maybe, but not in that full capacity, because the problem is there's no equity.
Yep.
There's no equity in cameras. So I like it. I have that skill set, but I think if somebody was like, hey, come build me this system, I would do that for a fee, or maybe an ongoing like consulting at a much. I mean, Brandon paid me extremely well. I earned it, but he paid me extremely well for what I did, and I would do that, but only on a sort of either project or consulting basis, but not as a full-time gig again.
So when you're looking for equity, is that a business? Is that another real estate deal? Keeping your options open?
Both. Yeah.
Okay. What's like?
Yeah. There's certain things that I gravitate towards. I'm a long-time investor, so I really liked single family and multifamily residential real estate for a long time because it was underpriced. So now it's not underpriced.
No. Not
So
at all.
I'm looking for things that nowadays what I'm looking for is I think about myself more as a people investor than a deal investor. I found that you can get really good deals with really mediocre operators and they fall apart, and you can get really bad deals or like really like okay deals with great operators and they'll do better.
Yeah.
And people who are good operators and they buy mediocre deals or even lousy deals, if they can do it again, they'll get better. But if somebody buys a good deal and runs it into the ground, it's like run, because that person almost can't be saved. So I got a bunch of feelers out there what I'm going to do next, but mostly I'm focused on people who work hard, people who have big visions and know how to articulate those visions, because that's a rarer thing than I realized at first. And people who have what I call Alex-shaped holes in their company or life, where I'm like, okay, I have a fit. Not just like you're doing great, but I'm like, there's a lot of people I meet that are doing great, but they don't need me.
Sure. Is the investing in people aspect part of the misfit?
Misfits.
Misfits?
Misfits is... What is misfits? It's hard to explain specifically because it is a misfit, right?
No, it was very intentional.
I'll say, yeah,
Say
I'll preface it by saying this.
Very intentional.
The ambiguity has to be intentional because it's people who don't fit into a certain box. So you can't label it because it's like, I don't fit anywhere. I don't fit into a box. I will say this. It's a small private WhatsApp group of less than 30 people. It is not a big deal. But
Not yet.
in some ways, it's like my most important thing because I go around the world and I go to Best Ever Conference and I go to Better Life and I go to my buddy's War Room and I go to Bigger Pockets and then I'll go to ADPI Con and I'll go to Boutique Hotel Con. And I'm a social butterfly. I'm the most extroverted person on planet Earth. And then what I do is I collect certain people along the way where I'm like, you are a superstar who doesn't belong and can't find where they belong. You're my people. And then I put him and I take him in that group. It's only probably 2 months old, Misfits. It's not that old. But that's the premise.
Got it. And how many of those people have like contrary thinking to yours?
One.
Is that...
You mean like who's a contrarian? Like I'm a deep contrarian.
Yeah. Like how many other contrarian thinkers are there in that group?
Jordan House Hay is definitely, he's probably more contrarian than me. It's so annoying.
Competition?
Yeah. It's just, yeah, it's fine. I love Jordan. It is not a group for contrarians. It's a group for people who have a set of skill sets. They've done a little bit of business and or real estate, right? It's not an education platform. There's no courses, there's no coaching, there's no cost. It's just like, do you have some skill set, can articulate maybe a little bit of your blind spots, you know? You're looking for community and you have been disillusioned by previous communities.
Got it. Well, that's exciting, man. I think, like you said, it's not a big deal, but I'm sure it's a big deal to the people that are in there. And then fast forward 1, 2, 5 years, and there'll be some big things that come out of it.
Yeah, we're gonna cap it at 100 people. That's my goal.
That's good. I've been involved with organizations, even conferences, right? But definitely meetups that have 1,000 people in them, and you kind of just get lost in the sauce, right? It's kind of like anybody that can pay a fee gets in, and then it's hard to find your people inside of that big pond like that. Whereas if the pond is smaller, you can swim with fish that are like-minded.
Yes, and the difference is, and I mean, you brought it up, so I don't know if you looked, but everybody's welcome to apply.
Yep.
We have a 3-tier vetting process that is not strict, but it is secret, and it is consistent. The difference that I wanted to do with this group is I didn't want to be pay to play. Like everybody with $1,000 can join. It's like, that's not a filter. That's just the operator trying to get money. Mm-hmm. That's not a thing. And then when you get to this big, you're like, there's no community in the world that's 1,000 people. Not really. No. 10,000 people? No. What you do is you get things like, I mean, church does this, right? And then you're like, well, we're all Christians. It's like, okay, well, we're all this religion or we're all this thing. It's like, right, but you don't hang out with everybody. You hang out with like maybe your church. And even in your church, you might go to your small group of 6 people.
Yep.
And some groups have been good at doing pods and breaking things down into smaller groups. But I find those 2 motives, the profit motive and the scalability motive, I wanted to avoid. So I said, we won't scale it and we won't make a pay to play. We will make a vetted, very deliberate filtering process by personality.
Yeah, I think you're on the right track for sure, because even if you're not financially paying for it, you are paying with the most valuable asset you have, which is your time and investment into it. And what's that thing where it's like you only can build deep relationships with like 70 people or something like that? Like you're giving up one of those slots in this.
Dunbar's number.
Yes.
Dunbar's number. It's like 150 people. But I thought to myself, I'm like, well, this is going to be an online thing, right? You're going to have your family. You're going to have your extended family. You're going to have your local gym friends. You're going to have your local hangout friends. You're going to have your real estate company. That's going to be 50 people right out of the gate. So here's the other 100.
Yep. I like it. What on the workout note, what's your workout routine look like these days?
Dude, you know what's funny? So many people ask me this. I'm just going to write a blog about it. I'll write a blog about it. I'll send it to you. Squats, bench, deadlift. Done.
That's it. Every
Done.
day? Or every lift session?
No. I have squat day, bench day, deadlift day. And I alternate, and then I do about 4 days a week. And I've been doing that. You do 300-400 pound squats for 22 years, and you'll get in shape, guaranteed.
Yes, sir. Do you train for anything? Like event specific?
Nope.
Nope.
I just like being tough.
Yeah. My buddy and I signed up for a Spartan race in a town that's a few hours away from here, but he's an ultra marathoner runner, like those guys that do like the 100-mile things. And I am not. And so I signed up for a long enough race that I knew that I had to kick my ass into gear on the running side so that I didn't get left in the dust, because nothing is worse or more painful than me than being embarrassed in a physicality-based event. So.
Really? How old are you?
30.
30? Yeah. Well, get your shit together.
Oh, I think I'm working on it, right? So like I still work out very regularly. Now it's just the running aspect, like long distance running.
Yeah, I would.
And that's always been a challenge.
Yeah, I would quit. I don't run. All right, well, that's enough about Alex. Who are you?
So started up in a town about 20 miles north of here. I live in Missoula right now. The town I grew up in was in Arlee. Grew up very, very poor. Ended up moving in and finishing high school with my grandparents. After that, my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, we moved out to this town that we're in now. Worked our way up through different jobs, looked at real estate, was in the Army, and then deployed to Afghanistan. And then while I was there, had the fortunate opportunity to be around a bunch of like retired engineers, architects, project managers, things like that for the Army Corps of Engineers. And all of those guys were investors on the side, and they were making more money doing the investing on this at the end of their career than they were making in Afghanistan on a contractor salary. And at the time, I thought I wanted to go work for some letter agency law enforcement stuff. And that was like right at the time that all of the anti-police riots and stuff were going on, like 2015, 2016. And I just looked at that. The military has one news channel, right? And it's Fox News. And so it was just like all of the craziness going on. And I was like, man, I don't know if that's a world I want to jump into right now. And so anyway, being around those people convinced me to kind of change trajectory. When I came back, started working my way into the real estate world, started in insurance, started our own property management company, and then eventually landed in the title world. And so we bought our first property in 2019, used my VA loan, house hacked, very traditional stuff. Rolled that into bigger and bigger projects, did some out-of-state stuff based on the story I told you. And then now we're kind of progressing into like the infill development aspect, doing a lot more land development, multifamily, stuff like that. And then along the way, I sat on a couple boards and nonprofits, one of which I met my now business partner, Nick. And he married into a family that's very prominent in the engineered wood product space. So his father-in-law co-founded the International Mass Timber Conference out in Portland. Mass timber is just an engineered wood product that replaces concrete and steel in big buildings. And so he reached out to me. He's like, hey, man, let's do a deal together. I was like, that's great, but COVID's crazy. It was actually cheaper to build new buildings than it was to purchase and remodel old ones in our market. So I said, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not buying a 100-year-old building, putting some Band-Aids on it, and then hoping for the best when I can build something brand new, high performance, market differentiating. And he's like, well, have you heard about this stuff called mass timber? I hadn't. So he's like, let's go out to the conference, right? And that was in well, they didn't have one in 21 because of COVID. And then in 2022, we went out there and just kind of drank from the fire hose of like, what is it? What applications are it for? where's it being used, how much it costs, all that kind of stuff. At the time, the powers that be, the government agencies that advocate for it and help bring projects online, weren't focused on the multifamily space, which is what we were hoping to get out of it. And so I got a big mouth. I asked a lot of questions at seminars and stuff like that. And I just asked, how can we use this for housing? How can we use this for workforce housing? Like, there's housing shortages everywhere, especially during COVID. Like, we're a mountains, like Zoom town, if you will, that got hit pretty hard with like the real estate prices. I think they've almost tripled now since 2020. And so we're like, hey, we've got land to build. We want to build better buildings that can last 100, 200 years. We want to market differentiate. We want buildings that are healthier and pleasant to be in, right? I think I get pretty tired of like four drywall surfaces in my room. I like to see exposed timber. Maybe that's just a Montana thing. Anyway, so this kind of fit the bucket.
It is.
And after those seminars, people would come up and they'd be like, hey, that's why we're here. Or, hey, did you talk to Johnny? Like, he built one of those apartment buildings using it. So we basically went on a cold calling and cold emailing spree, reaching out to all the producers, engineers, architects that are working with this stuff, and said, hey, we want to build housing with this. 99 out of 100 said, it doesn't work, you're crazy, it's not gonna happen. But then 1 out of 100 said, yeah, man, let's talk, let's figure it out, or let's connect you with this guy that did it. And so after a while, we had so many of these conversations, asking the same questions, getting the same answers. And we started sharing what we were learning, and then people started reaching out to us. Like, hey, what did you learn about X, Y, and Z? And so very similar to what you're doing now, we're like, hey, let's just record these conversations and share them with the world. That's where our podcast got started. Got an industry newsletter on the same thing, and then we're really big on LinkedIn. And so we started one of the fastest growing, most engaged profiles, channels, business pages inside that niche market. And then out of that, we started a conference out in the Denver area, which is a hotspot, new growing market for this type of material. So,
dude, good for you. And now you're slumming it with me?
No, not at all.
Dude, that sounds great. Good for you.
Thanks,
congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. It's been a wild ride, but super grateful that we did it. I actually went full time in this position at the end of January. So, and we have a baby on the way in August. And so it's like, it's go time,
dude,
right? Like everything.
You're firing at all cylinders right now.
Yeah. There's nothing more motivating than knowing that there's a life that's about to depend on you in 3 months. So.
Yeah. I don't have any, so I don't know, but
yeah,
good luck.
Yeah. Thanks, man. So,
yeah.
When you're recording these things and you're talking with different people, what's something that you've taken away in the last month that really stood out to you?
In the last month? I've been doing this so long, dude. Yeah. I've realized that a lot of people do this podcast, whatever the case, because they see what kind of status they can get from it. And I always did it because I genuinely like talking to people all day. So in fact, in 5 minutes, I have another one, and then I have another one after that. And so I probably do, and I probably did 3 hours of Zoom calls today. I don't prefer Zoom calls. I prefer to talk in person, but it's harder to record that in a lot of ways.
Sure.
So the number one thing I've realized is I'm way more extroverted than I sort of knew that, but I'm like hyper, mega, off the charts extroverted. So if you like talking to people, if you genuinely like talking to people, this has a really long trajectory. I think a lot of people don't actually like talking to people. They want to be famous, at which point you're gonna quit or kill yourself. It's not sustainable to do something you hate. I will say this too. One thing that I've really learned with strangers versus other podcasts, I never call this a podcast. I never call it a show, right? It's just me talking to people with no agenda, and then I happen to publish it. And nobody watches it yet, but that's an ops problem, not a conversation problem. I think the conversations are valuable. Although it is hard to produce a value proposition of like, what is this about? It's different every time. What I've learned is you can talk to people in any format that you want. I think a lot of people see a Joe Rogan or a Bigger Pockets and it's an interview. And so you're like, I'm going to be an interviewer. And I'm like, I don't know. Being an interviewer is one of those things, kind of like being an extrovert. You don't get to choose. And it's not everybody. I'm not an interviewer. I don't want to interview people all day. Tell me about your story. Tell me about your thing. Tell me about this. Tell me about this. I'm like, how do I know you? Oh, this thing. And like we just kind of riff back and forth. And I like to get to know people, but I don't want to do it in a I don't want to do it in like a constant softball. Like this is just like this is this guy and he's great in every single way. And it's like it just becomes so toothless. So what I've learned is if you want to do conversations with people and you like people, you have a long runway. The second part is find out a format that really works for you, because it doesn't have to be the format that everybody else does. In fact, it probably shouldn't be. You know,
Yeah.
It probably shouldn't be the format that everybody else does.
Yeah, I like it. It's good takeaways.
That's my contrarian, right? I do whatever I want to do. I don't care what the right way is.
Yeah, well, doing what you want to do is that key to longevity. So.
Yeah, and it's not just like what I want to do. I think it's more fun this way. I don't know. If you came on here and there's definitely a fun in being like a podcast guest. There's like they're going to interview me and I get to talk about myself, and like who doesn't love that? And that's all great. But it's also, if you go, how many podcasts, how many times how successful do you have to get before you're like, I don't want to go on another podcast of 10 episodes of somebody who's like a lousy interviewer just to like boost up their SEO. It gets old real quick. So I think the people who enjoy it and have like a unique format or kind of, do their own thing, I think that attracts people in a different way. Also, I don't have a logistics problem. That's one of the biggest things about podcasts is like, if you do a podcast, you're like, well, I got to have Bigger Pockets now has to find somebody in real estate that has over 10 guests every single week. It's not hard for Bigger Pockets. It's hard for every other real estate show who's a nobody. And they're like they got a whole machine going, outreach, getting people on the show. It's all this logistics. Me, I just go out there, I go to conferences, I go to podcasts, I just go to the world and I yell, Alex, 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 Alex. And I say interesting things. And then you know what? I say, come talk to me for free. And people just sign up in droves.
Yeah. Yeah. What about
no logistics?
What is it just you
so distribution
all the...
Distribution just started. I have a theory with some of the new tools that you can do it, a lot of it with AI. I think there's a guy I know, he basically runs YouTube channels. If this had any kind of income source for me, I would go just hire him. I would hire essentially an agency, but a pretty small boutique agency. So for now, I think you can get this done on $1,200-$1,500 a month to a minimal degree. But if you want to get it bigger, you're probably going to have to spend 5 to 7.
Interesting. Yeah, we use a lot of AI tools for everything, and our in-house media team consists of 2 people. We're running at like $1,000 a month, but those AI tools trim out so much of what used to cost a lot.
Yeah, agreed. And I don't really care about like high quality production. I really am like raw and real, bro. I think I'm of the opinion that good content rises to the top. So for me, I really have not been doing this that long. And I've really not spent that much time hiring before. I've been a very, a lone wolf, nomadic type guy. So now, especially after watching Brandon and learning all those lessons, I'm like, the problem I did a podcast 5 years ago that I really liked, but it was so high production, I ended up drowning within 12 months. And I was like, I can't do that again. And the mistake I made there was I quit the podcast instead of outsourcing the podcast. Yep. And that's just lessons learned. So I've always been a little scarce about like spending money on things that don't make money. And I'm growing out of that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey man, I know we're at time.
Yeah.
Thanks for hopping on with me.
What can I do for you before we go?
I'd love to pick your brain on some of those podcast topics. I can shoot you an email with some of the questions I had and things that I've noticed that you've done on your podcast or show or lack thereof here. And so
I gotta come up with a new name with it.
Yeah. So
sure. Whatever works for you. I mean, we can set up another call too. It doesn't have to be this, but I'm glad I do this to meet people.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, thanks, man.
Yeah.
Appreciate you. Enjoy the rest of your calls, and we'll be in touch.
Dude, you're the best. Great to meet you. Hey, congratulations again on all of it.
Hey,
it sounds like you've done tremendous. I'm happy for you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. See ya.
All right, buddy. Be well.